Hi, Lily. Thank you for being here with me today. I'm very excited to chat about your life, your story, and all the things Lilly Stairs. I'd love it if you could share a little bit with our audience about who you are and, your connection with chronic illness, and then we can get started to talk about what you do and what you've built.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and happy to jump in and share a little bit more about me. My Genesis story as it relates to where we are now is that when I was 19, I was diagnosed back to back with two autoimmune conditions, which brought me up to three in total.
Mm.
And I had a very severe onset. I had arthritis that was total body to the point that my mom was dressing me and feeding me. And I was later diagnosed with Crohn's disease. They found bleeding ulcers in my small intestine. They were
Oh,
very,
wow.
very intense, heavy on symptoms, scary. Took a while to get diagnosed after being in the hospital for a couple of weeks. So I was 19. I had just started college, right? I had been in college for a year. I went to Northeastern, which was a school that has a co op program. And so I was actually jumping into work as well. We would be six
Hmm.
months at school, 6 months at work, and I was navigating living with these chronic conditions. And I really talk about how, from the moment I was in that hospital bed and I was diagnosed with all of these conditions at 19, these conditions I would live with
Hmm.
for the rest of my life, I thought, oh my God, what's happening? This shouldn't be happening
Hmm.
to me at such a young
Hmm.
age. So I typed into Google, and what comes up but the term autoimmune? And I was mad because I had never heard the term autoimmune in my life, but it turns out there's an estimated 50 million Americans who are living with
Yeah.
one or more autoimmune conditions. And so that really was the spark. It lit a fire under me. And from that hospital bed, I became an advocate and I got involved in fundraising and advocacy work for the Autoimmune Association. And then later moved into a career in healthcare, which I'm sure we'll talk more about.
Mm. It's funny. Your story sounds so close to mine. I was diagnosed my senior year in college. So like right after I did 4.5 years. So it was after that last half semester, you get done, and all of a sudden I'm like, this is not what I just spent all that money on a career, degree for a career and going forward. And it just like completely stopped me in my tracks where it was the same thing. I'm like, what is an autoimmune disease? What is that? Who has this? What's going on? Why do I feel terrible all the time? What is happening to me? And you're young, you're supposed to be starting your life or getting into college and doing all of those things. And it's like, now you're trying to learn to be an adult in a normal world. And now you have the medical world that you have to navigate too. That is not easy for anybody, especially in that transitional period. So I can't imagine how difficult it was for you, but I see you've come to the other side of it, which is so wonderful. And what the advocate world is what connected us too. So I know that people like you who have that passion, who really want to make those changes, you know, I think about myself. If I hadn't gone through what I went through, I wouldn't be right here doing these things. And not necessarily grateful to it, but I'm not not grateful to it either.
Yeah,
But
it's giving you purpose, right? It's you've
mhm,
got a passion for what you do, and that is special.
yeah. Now, with your advocating, how did you work through that? Trying to navigate through school and advocating for yourself, getting to doctor's appointments. We've had a lot of different people talk about, I'm afraid to go to school. I'm afraid to maybe ask for accommodations and things like that. What type of obstacles did you come into and what did you do about them?
Yeah, well, right off the bat, I had a class that I had fought to get into. So this was my sophomore year of
Hmm.
college that I had just been diagnosed that summer. And there was a class that only accepted upperclassmen, but I really wanted to be a part of it because I'm type A and go getter and all the things. And it was a professor who I heard is really challenging, but life changing. And
Hmm.
so I said, I have to be in that class. And I somehow got my way in as a sophomore, but then I was delayed in starting the semester because of my diagnoses. And so I remember the professor met with me when I finally got back, and I was still so sick. Okay, we hadn't obviously with autoimmune, it takes a little bit of time to figure out, like, the right cocktail that works for you, and so
Mhm.
I was so sick, and he basically said he didn't think that I should continue with the class, I was already behind, and
Mm.
I said, "No, I wanna be here, I got to be here, and I'm gonna do it.
Mhm.
I'm gonna prove you wrong." And I did, and then some. He ended up, actually making me his youngest TA, his teacher's assistant he ever had, so he likes to tell that story too, that he was a real jerk, but then, he, ended up just we had a great relationship. So, so I am a gritty person, and I was said, I am going to keep moving forward,
Mhm.
but I did have to learn that there were places that I needed to think about accommodations. And so I didn't even know there was a disability resource center on campus, and
Mhm.
I had a doctor that had suggested that I look into that. And I said, "Well, I don't really have a disability. That doesn't make sense," because at the time, I was thinking about disability as being something physical, right? Like, you think disability, you think
Of
someone in a
course. Mhm.
and of course, my lens has been completely changed on that after being
Yeah.
in part of this community and seeing that disabilities can be invisible. And so I met with the team there, and I felt like this was a good safety net for me to have if I really felt like I wasn't um doing okay in school, or I needed additional accommodations. I ended up not needing to lean on them too much, but it was something that I did know was there and was helpful.
That's great. I know that, since I got sick after college, that I didn't need to lean into that, but, some of the people that I've talked to who've gone through college, especially when they're on TPN or tube feeds and they have, like, the extra literal something that they have to carry around with them and maybe have to leave and come back from the classroom, that's been helpful. I know not everyone's experience is wonderful with those offices, but it's great to know that they do exist.
Yeah.
Um Now, with getting through all of that, it sounds like from the outside lens, it sounds like you figured it out, which I know you did, but that there were no obstacles. You got to where you were, like you just zoomed right through, and I know that that's not true. So, we're just because that's the nature of autoimmune issues, chronic disease, that there were probably times that you felt some doubt, maybe like, can I do this? Am I going to be able to reach what I'm trying to reach for? Now, in those moments of doubt, to be blunt, what did you do? Did you pull back a little bit if things started to get worse and have to pivot? Was there something you leaned into that helped you get through those hard times?
Yeah, absolutely. So it did take a few years for me to get my autoimmune conditions into remission. So they were active, and I was dealing with trying to change my diet. I was trying different medications, and that was all a lot to carry through college.
Mhm.
At the same time, I do feel like this purpose was ignited in me when I received those diagnoses, and so I leaned into that. I did. I leaned into, what can I do? How can I make this a really challenging and in many ways heartbreaking thing that has
Mhm.
happened to me? How can I turn that around so that I can help others? And that was what I poured into. And there were different levels of that depending on how I was feeling, right? So
Sure.
I started with what I felt like was what I could manage, because I ended up taking some time off from school after I got my second diagnosis of Crohn's. It was psoriatic arthritis and then Crohn's.
Mhm.
And so I ended up taking some time off because I just was too sick to go.
Yeah.
I needed to give my body rest. So I had a full 6 months off, which was extraordinarily challenging for me because I loved school. I loved being at college. Had so many friends. In Boston, like living in the big city. I loved it.
Yeah.
So that was hard. But what I did during that time was I started blogging because I felt like it was an incredible outlet for me to pour into others and to really get my thoughts and feelings out on paper. So I wasn't building a company, from the moment I was diagnosed, but I did start just getting my thoughts on paper and trying to find ways to help others. And that was really therapeutic for me.
Did that feel scary to put yourself out there? Like, I know that writing things down and journaling has been really helpful and therapeutic for me as well. And even starting the podcast here, my personal story outside of G-PACT and sharing that always felt like I've gotten past it now, obviously, but it felt so scary to begin with. Like, what if they judge me? What if they say something? Like, what if my feelings get hurt? It's really scary to put yourself out there just because you don't know how somebody's going to take what you have to say. It might be therapeutic for you, but you want it to be helpful, but we're not always as helpful as we want to be, depending on where somebody else is in their journey.
Yeah, there certainly was a little hesitation initially. I do remember that I really wanted to do it. I felt like this is the right thing. I saw when I had started Googling, as one does when they get these diagnoses, although I guess it's now probably ChatGPT. But as one starts looking through all that, I actually did see other people who were sharing their stories, and it helped me, and I thought, "Oh my god, this is a great way that I could help other people," and so I was
Yeah.
really focused on that. I certainly had some hesitation from or other people around me who said, "Are you sure you wanna be putting that out on the internet? You can't really take it back once it's out there," and I said, "No, this is I wanna own the story. I'm owning it.
Mhm.
This is not gonna make me I'm not this is not gonna make me look weaker. I'm framing it. I'm owning this, and, like, look at me taking something like if somebody has a problem with me putting this out there, they're gonna judge me for that. That's on them because I'm
Mhm.
doing to help others and I feel really good about it. So that was my mentality.
Yeah, that's very similar. I shared something earlier today on our G-PACT page, and it was something I said to my husband. I'm like, "Oh, here's what we're gonna put out," and he just looks at me and he's like, "Yeah, you would." And I'm just like, "You know what? I like my shame went out the window when I realized how that mentality, that vulnerability, like that attitude is actually what I have found for a lot of people is what draws you in. That's what
Yeah,
you're looking for. Like even if you don't have an answer, but maybe you have a vibe that somebody is attracted to and really wants to learn from because telling your story isn't easy. Even if it's a happy piece of your story, you're still being vulnerable and you're still sharing something and that's not easy to do. It's not.
absolutely.
Um
Absolutely.
Now at what point did you turn that from helping people just as I'll say a hobby to more of this is my life goal or a career goal, then I want to turn the life that essentially you didn't ask for into a life that you could create and mold into something that worked for you.
Yeah. Well, I it actually all happened pretty quickly.
Mhm.
So because I was at Northeastern where they have the co-op program, that same professor who originally told me to leave his class that made me his TA, he actually was the one who later said, "Have you thought about going into biotech?" And at the time, I didn't even know what biotech was. I
Mhm.
and I live in Boston. I'm in the hub of medicine and game-changing innovation and the drugs that have ultimately saved my life. And so it was so interesting because he opened my eyes to that world and I ended up pursuing a co-op at Mass Bio, which is the trade association for biotech and pharma companies, and just fell in love with being within this industry that was serving me as a patient and then my community. And so it all happened in tandem. I mean, I was diagnosed at 19, and I think that I did that co-op when I was 20. So it
Mhm.
it was right away. I just jumped right in, both feet with healthcare. And at the same time, I also started a campaign called the Fight for Immunity 50 Cents for 50 Million campaign that was organized on my campus and then around the city of Boston to raise funds and awareness for the Autoimmune Association. And so it was literally 24/7 healthcare and patient
Mhm.
advocacy.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see people and listen to people's stories of you never knew this piece of the world existed. You didn't know like what patient advocacy was. You didn't know how to do patient advocacy, how to talk to people, that some of these jobs, these organizations, these companies, this technology exists. And then all of a sudden, like it's that very cliche as one door closes, another door opens, but it's really true that that door may never have opened for you. And you have worked with so many women and so many people and impacted so many lives that if that door hadn't opened for you, you don't want to go down that road. I have to tell myself not to do it when I'm like, what if this happened or what if this didn't happen? But it seems like this role for you really fits who you are and who you continue to become. And, just for the short few years that I've known you and been able to see you grow and, grow your business, grow your advocacy, and all these different moving parts, like, I don't know how you do it, frankly, because there's always so many things to do. And, there's so many things that change constantly. And we have to keep up with the changes in the advocacy world and within healthcare while also maintaining our own healthcare. So,
Mm.
do you have any strategies for anyone listening, myself, about how to balance things better?
Yeah, and I will say I don't do it perfectly all the time. I go through seasons, and I'm in a
Mhm.
season of trying to find better balance because I've been running at an unsustainable pace, and my body is telling me to slow down. And so
Mhm.
everything I'm going to share are things that I'm just working on starting to implement. Again, it's not perfect all the time, but I will tell you that from the jump, from the time that I was working like on in co-ops, I was always really dedicated to getting sleep. I'm big on sleep. I've always been big on sleep. I always get
Mhm.
7 to 8 hours of sleep every night. That's really
Very
important.
jealous.
I don't have a good day if I don't get enough sleep. Ask my fiance. He's like, "Oh god, you didn't sleep well. It's not gonna be a good day." So that's number one. I am honoring that for myself. And then I am actively working on building in time blocking. So that's another big thing I talk about. And I talk about this a lot with our entrepreneurs, to time block and to say, okay, here's how I'm going to break up my day. I am going to give myself some time in the morning. So I've started getting up earlier so that I have time to really like not just jump and hit the ground running and jump
Mhm.
into or workout. I'm getting up and I'm reading and I'm having lemon water and I'm relaxing. And then I go to the gym because that's another thing. I need to move my body every
Mhm.
day. I know I feel better when I move my body in the morning. So I do that.
Absolutely.
I'm fortunate to be able to do this because I have been in remission for a number of years now, thanks to medication that I take to help keep my autoimmune diseases in remission. I know that I still have to take care of myself so that I don't
Hmm.
get into a flare. And this
Mhm.
is that. But and I recognize that not everybody can maybe go to the gym. There are a lot of different accessible tools out there. Like I know Allie was on your podcast, and that's RA, and she has her chair sleigh workout. So, anyways,
Mhm.
not to get off track, but I try to get movement in my day, and then I'm time blocking my day. So I'm working on maybe patient authentic stuff. Then I go to chronic boss for a couple of hours. It's all organized so that I'm being most efficient as I can with my time. And now I'm working on my after your 9 to 5, your 5 to 9, I'm trying to turn
Mhm.
up more and spend time with my fiance, my friends, relaxing. So it is a true blend. It's hard sometimes to turn off, but I am actively working on putting that balance in and those checkpoints in because if I don't have them, then I know that I set myself up to go way backwards and go into a flare and then not be able to do
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, I feel that very, very much, especially like I love working from home, especially given that I have very unpredictable conditions that can make it so maybe I can work for the day, but I need to work from my bed, or I have worked from the bathroom, when it's like I just can't get out of the bathroom. I have worked from the bathroom floor. Not ideal, but you can't do that in an office setting. So I know how fortunate that I am that I do have the ability to work from home. And I love it. Some of the problem that I found is that shutting off that you were talking about, like because my office is in my home, my job is in my home, it got very difficult to turn that off and really shut down. Like I'm out of work mode and I'm in, just Sam. This is not work Sam. This is Sam as just an individual, as a wife, as a person, as a friend, as a daughter, whatever I want to do that's not blending into my work life. And just like you said, it's not something that is easy. And I still have to really work on that to separate out. Like, I don't leave and come home and leave the office at the office. My door to my office is where I spend some of my time when I'm home too. So it's hard to really pull out of that mindset. But I think you're so right that in order to make it work, you have to find whatever works for you. And what works for you might not work for somebody else, but the idea that you're focusing on finding what works for you, I think is really the most important piece, because just with dealing with our healthcare, everything is trial and error in life. So you have to find the one piece or two pieces that work or don't work so you can really, move forward from that. It's not easy, especially navigating your own healthcare and trying to figure out what you're doing when advocacy is your day job and your personal life. It gets a little
It's
difficult.
it's hard. It's hard, and I'll tell you, there's a new book out called Toxic Grit by
Mm,
Amanda Getz. It's incredible, and she talks about the different characters in our life. It's character theory, and so we have the CEO, the partner, the
mhm.
caregiver, the doctor, and all of these parts, and how all of these different characters need screen time in life. Like, you can't have the CEO be the leading character all the time. You need
Yeah.
to let the partner be the leading character sometimes, and the caregiver. And so she actually talks about, when you talk about struggling to turn off, when you're flipping between characters, she talks about this transition framework that allows you to, like, she talks about when she goes from dropping her kids off to then going to the gym, she puts on a music playlist that pumps her
Mhm.
up. It gets her in the mindset of, okay, now I'm transitioning to take care of myself. So I think that's a great book rec for anyone who is stuck in that toxic productivity mindset. It's a really awesome book for trying to break that cycle.
That's good. I'll have to remember that, because I could definitely use a little extra advice in that area for myself. Um,
We all, yeah.
yeah. It's it's very, this life is not for the weak, and when you are trying to find your place in the world, I know for myself going into, I'll say real adulthood, when I'm outside of college, I'm like I'm ready to, be kicked out of the nest, and I want to fly, and I want to go do all these things, and like I got kicked out of the nest, but I had two broken wings, and like my feet were held down, and I couldn't do what I wanted to do. There was no way for me at the time to go out and do what I wanted to, and trying to navigate and find, what became successful to me at certain points was getting from the bed to the couch. That to
Mm.
me some days was a successful day. Some days it was keeping down a cracker was a successful day. And it's interesting how I imagine you have felt this to a degree yourself, when you have to define your successes differently. When you're in a corporate job or any sort of job, your successes tend to be, how well did you do at work? How did your project go? Are you climbing the corporate ladder? How many connections did you make? Did you get a raise? Did you get all of those different things are what define success in that world. And when you don't quite fit in that world, it's really hard to know what to define success as without feeling like a failure, because those different successes don't line up. When someone out there is even maybe getting married, having a family, having a house, maybe that is success to you. And I know at one point that was a dream for myself. And when I'll say started really leaning into that dream as feeling that that meant success, I was in no position physically, mentally, or emotionally to even go down that road. And it's been really hard to reframe success over time and really reframe achievements. And it doesn't get easier. It's just constant adapting and saying, this isn't a failure unless I don't learn anything from it. And that's something for me that I've really tried to lean into, as my body has unfortunately dictated what I can do or can't do. My mind wants to go do it, but my body says no. So do I determine that as a failure? It's really hard not to fall into that trap and really let that hurt you. So I can imagine you felt that too, in all different ways over the years and different points of success in your story.
Yeah, and it's something that we talk about a lot at Chronic Boss, and we have what we'll be rolling out soon. chronic boss KPIs, these life KPIs. And so instead of
Yeah.
just looking at, and key KPIs are a key performance indicator in work for those who don't know. So when you talk about measuring success, KPIs are
Mhm.
often used to measure your success. And so we like to think at Chronic Boss about success and measuring success across all different parts of your life. And so let's think we have a lot of entrepreneurs who we work with in our collective and talking about how success for you, yes. So one KPI could be number of new clients, but
Mhm.
another KPI could be number of flare free days in a
Mhm.
week or, ability to start your day at 10 or 11 a.m. because you have really bad brain fog in the morning. And that's a
Mhm.
win. That's a performance indicator. I was able to do that every day. So we talk about those different ways to measure success so that it's not just focused on those traditional metrics, as you mentioned, that
Mhm.
we see in the workforce.
Yeah, those took me a long time to really stop wrapping my brain around feeling unsuccessful because I wasn't able to do that.
Mm,
And I know when I got out of college was when, everything started to fall apart. And at that time, my peers were moving into their careers. They were moving into their long-term relationships or going into marriage, which turned into kids and homes and all of those things. I started to isolate myself and I didn't want to talk about their achievements as much as I wanted to cheer them on and I wanted to be there for them and I was proud of them. It hurt every single time I had to see what they had that I didn't. And
mm,
it took me years to stop feeling that way. And the job that I have now, doing what I do with G-PACT, that really has helped fulfill a lot of those holes and to redefine what is success for me. And I've learned really that the most successful thing that I feel is when I listen to myself and stop being so mean to myself. And really just saying like, I've survived a lot. I've been through a lot, and I'm not in a traditional setting. I'm not in a space that anybody else needs to define what I define as success. And what works for me doesn't work for anybody. It has to work for anybody else. If I feel proud of this achievement, then I have succeeded. If I am coming out of this that I've learned something, that is an achievement. And taking that non-traditional route has really been helpful to me and just trying to figure out where I fit in this world. But it's not
yeah,
easy and still something to work on all the time.
absolutely.
I know I've said this before in a couple other episodes in regard to like exercise and chronic illness, but you feel like you have to work twice as hard for half the reward
Mm,
because of feeling maybe you're behind in life and you're trying to catch up. So you're always doing more, but sometimes that can set you back without realizing it because you're pushing too hard and you need that rest and you need to take time to go forward. And, you know, really trying to manage all of those things, it takes a lot to really figure out what works. And as I've talked about this with different people, I'm like, I'm still learning and I don't think we ever stop. And as long as we keep learning, I think we really can continue to move forward, albeit a little slower than maybe we envisioned. But, you can only do what you can do. And that's a win in itself.
yeah. So well said. So well said, Sam.
One thing I do want to ask, because you work with people who are managing chronic illnesses and you work primarily with women, what would be a message that you would give to somebody trying to build a career, whatever that career might be, while also managing their chronic condition?
Yeah, I
It's
have
not
this.
easy.
It's not easy, but we do have a formula at Chronic Boss that I really love to share because it individualizes the advice that I'm about to give, and
Mhm.
it's something that folks can carry with them, whether they are starting their own business or they're interviewing for a full time job or part time job or whatever it might be. So, we like to say that your secret sauce is a skill. So, this could be writing, it could be coding, it could be communications, you name it, because it's a skill. And you pair that with a superpower that you've gained from living with a chronic condition. So, flexibility, adaptability,
Hmm.
empathy,
Mhm.
and you put those two together to create your secret sauce. And it allows you to own the narrative and to flip the script on living with a chronic condition and say, actually, this thing that you may see as a liability or that you think makes me weaker is actually something that makes me stronger and better at my job. And some examples of that are, when I was interviewing for jobs when I was still actively sick and living with my autoimmune conditions, I had a skill set in marketing and communications. So I would talk about that's my skill set. And I then would talk about the empathy, the superpower that I've gained because I had this inherent empathy for the patients that I was working in healthcare. So I had this inherent understanding of what patients were going through. And that became my
Mhm.
superpower because I was a skilled communicator who was able to empathize with our community. And you can apply this if you're not working in healthcare, this applies to anything. Like,
Mm.
thinking about if you're somebody who's applying to work at a startup. Let's say that your skill is coding and let's call your superpower flexibility and adaptability. Startups love people who are flexible and adaptable because things are changing all the time. So your
Yeah.
ability to flex and change and roll with the punches is a huge asset to that company. And so I think for a lot of people we we think, "Oh god, I have X condition and I don't really wanna disclose it because they're going to think less of me. But
Mhm.
no, you flip the script, you own that narrative, and you talk about how it's actually an asset.
Yeah. I love that because even, what I feel with myself, I'm like, I never know when to tell people. It was that way with dating, it was that way with jobs. It's like, how do I tell you that I'm unpredictable and I don't know when something's going to happen, or I don't know where my limits are, or I don't know, I'm not reliable. And it's so interesting to hear, somebody take what sounds inherently negative and something that is, maybe not the best quality, and like you said, you own the narrative and find a way to make those situations work for you in a new career, in a new space. And I think that's great advice for anybody. And I hope that anybody listening is going to say, "Oh, I didn't know that my like unreliability could be my superpower."
Exactly.
Well,
You can take it and spin it however you want.
yeah, no, that's owning your power, owning your story. I think that's some of the best advice, because you feel when you've been diagnosed with something that your power has been taken from you, right? Like the control has been taken from you. So knowing that there's a way to claw some of that back and use it how you want to use it and use it for yourself, that's huge. And, you don't always think that you can do that until you see someone like yourself say, "You absolutely can do that. Let me show you how." So, thank
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
Of course, and I'll also add that that secret sauce is something, sure, you can absolutely share it, and if it's a way that's helpful for you to disclose your chronic condition, I think that's a great way to do it. But if you're also somebody who doesn't wanna disclose and you're in a position where you don't necessarily have to, it can also just be something that you hold on to for yourself that
Yeah.
reminds you why you are
Mm.
powerful and gives you that confidence, that extra boost of confidence that you need when you're walking into an interview or you're jumping out on your own to start your own business.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that and for chatting with me today. I think that reminding people that you are capable is so, so needed when you feel down or you feel like you're trying and you just don't know where to look. You are such an inspiration and guide to our community. So I just really appreciate you taking time out of, I know, your very busy schedule to chat with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sam, and thanks for the amazing advocacy work that
Yeah.
you are doing.
Thank you.
Your community is so lucky to have you, and we're lucky to have you as part of the larger advocacy community. So thanks for all that you do.
Thank you.